All right. All right. It's not very uh, it's not very encouraging, but although today is the last day, I have only 3 students currently, both in person and online. Uh, but uh, we have to do what we gotta do. The class must go on. Uh, so, and I wonder, yeah, there is nothing, I guess there is nothing that was, see, over the weekend, uh, all these computers reset, so there's nothing left there. The files that I saved, it's all gone, so I'll have to download them all over again. Let's see, we have 2 hours, and we're not in a hurry. I mean, 1 hour, 30 minutes, and we're not in a hurry, so no problem. So in our last class, um, we basically covered, we talked about how the first model, I mean, out of 4 models in stock valuation, right? Four dividend discount models. We discussed how the first model and the second model are derived, right? Which are basically, the first and the second one are constant dividend model and a constant growth model, constant dividend growth model. So the names could be confusing. I've been telling you very often that don't let the word constant mislead you, because the first model is constant dividend model, and if the dividend is constant, that means the dividend doesn't grow, right? Hence it's zero growth model, right? Another name for that is zero growth model. So here, let me download these things again. It was downloaded. And the second model, constant growth model, is also called golden growth model. And that means the dividend is growing at a constant rate, right? So actually these 2 models, the first model and the second model, are clearly the opposite. Okay, so let me open now. These files are downloaded, so let me open them. And yeah, please don't say update. And in our last class, we took a look at an example of, okay, where's my pen? So where is my, okay, draw. So in our last class, what we talked about was although look, basically how in this example I've been telling you in our last class, I was telling you that we need to use, of course, this formula, right? Gordon growth model, dividend at time t plus 1 over r minus g. But then they gave r, right? They gave growth rate, dividend growth rate, 7%. But how did they? Do we take this for granted? For this example, they gave it, but you cannot expect the problems to be that kind. Usually, they don't give you anything like this. There's a reason they gave you this data, dividend data. There's a reason why they did that. So usually they just give you the data, and you have to find required return. You have to find the dividend growth rate. So 2012 is the latest. So this is the time t. This is t minus 1. This is t minus 2, of course. Then 2007 is time t minus 5, right? So we have dividend at time. We have dividend at time t. So how do we find then the dividend at time t plus 1? Of course, dividend at time t plus 1 is dividend at time t times 1 plus growth rate, right? So growth rate is given. So all you need to do is, okay, then, $1.40 times, right? I cannot, 1.07, right? Times 1.07. And then required return is given, growth rate is given, and if you do this, it will come to $1.50, right? If you do this, and so dividend at time t plus 1 over r minus g, yeah, well then you'll get 18.75. But this is too easy. I mean, everything is provided. They gave you. Oh, did I bring my laser pointer? Right, I did. Okay, so they gave you the growth rate. They gave you the required return. Then why did they? What's the point of all of this? I mean, they could just give you $1.40, 2012 dividend. That would be enough. But what is this for? So this is why I'm saying in reality, you can't expect. I mean, who's going to give you this dividend growth rate in reality? Who's going to give you this, right? It's for you to find out. And then when the data is given, data set is given, you should be able to find out. Of course, required return is another matter. To find required return, you have to use CAPM. That's something that comes in the return and risk part 2. But given this data set, at least you can find growth rate. Why? Think about it. The growth rate each year, there are 5 years, right? 5 years here, right? And each year, growth rate is different. In other words, in reality, you can't expect uneven growth rate. That's not reality, isn't it right? You cannot expect. I mean, in the first year, 5%. In the second year, I don't know, 1.12 minus 1.05 divided by 1.05. It may be something different from 5%. And so each year, the growth rate is different. So how do we find a constant growth rate? That is the average. Think about it. If you take the average of these, average will be the constant, average is the constant growth rate. And you remember, uh, that's the first thing we did in the ROI, right? Remember? Um, we need to take the geometric average. We need to take the geometric average, right? Because it's 5 years, right? The growth over 5 years. We cannot, it's not simple average. There is clearly compounding effect here. So we have to, so geometric average itself is not a difficult thing. It's, future value over present value raised to 1 over n minus 1. And in our data set, this is the future value. This is the present value. So all you need, and the 5 years, n is 5. So all you need to do is simply, oops. 1 point, okay, thickness. Okay, $1.40, right? Over $1. That's, the ratio is 1.4 anyway. And then n is 5. And if you do that, you'll actually come out to 6.96%, right? It's not exactly 7%. They just used rounded number, right? They just rounded it. So I think I need, okay, one note. Again, it's doing this to me again. Give me a break. Oh. Give me a break. Look, I haven't got any email just yet. Let's go. I'll try. I can't even use this until I get a code from I have anything else? Okay, I'll have to. So anyway, since we already know, let's. Accessory. Right, I don't need this thing. Where's the calculator? Okay, I'm not. I'm not gonna actually calculate that here because I can't even pull out the calculator. But you know what's, what's uh, the actual, so if you do that, growth rate comes out as 6.96, and the exact number will be slightly different from this, but the difference won't be that significant. It will be just slightly different. But let me. I don't understand why they don't even have calculator. Office tool. Okay. Now, so we're going to move on to the so the third model is the variable growth model. Actually, variable growth means, um, think about it. Um, Not all the companies are growing at a constant rate. We have second model, the golden growth model, has been assuming that the company is growing at a constant rate. Um, but in reality, the companies grow at different variable growth rates. They go through variable growth phases. That doesn't mean that the growth rates are random. I mean, sometimes high, sometimes low, sometimes high, sometimes low. No, not like that. Not in that wacky motion. But uh, there is a very well-known stylized theory about the product life cycle. The product life cycle. Yeah, what happened? Um, so what um, it is also called industry life cycle. I mean, a macro version of this is called industry life cycle. The micro version of industry life cycle is product life cycle. And the product life cycle basically means that every product goes through um, uh, the life cycle, and as well as the industry. And what that means is that the products are going through R&D. This product I'm talking about is an innovative product, right? An innovative product is a product that has never existed before. That's an innovative product, right? Because in English language, there is the word new is inadequate in actually people. Suppose, when you say, I have a new car, I bought a new car. What does that mean? That's a new car, meaning it's a brand new car, right? It's a new model, or, it's not a used car, right? It can mean those things. Or, but that doesn't mean that this car is a completely new thing. If it is a completely new thing, let's say you have a flying car, right? You have a flying car. You just bought a flying car. It's an innovative product. Isn't that right? It's an innovative product because a flying car has never existed before, right? And if they have a commercial success of flying car, think about it. A drone is a very innovative product, isn't that right? Of course, drone has existed before. Drone means actually what drone meant in the 80s and 70s, 60s. What that meant was actually a target practice of flying. They use old, decommissioned planes, right? Autopiloted, and they turn it into a autopiloted plane, and then they fly it and use it as a target practice, right? For a dogfight or for missiles. That used to be what a drone is, right? Because literally the drone means male bee. And the male bee has only one use, one purpose. It mates with the queen bee and it dies. Right? So that plane being used for target practice, it's a drone. That's what it meant. Now drone is something you play with. Right? Of course, in the war, they still serve very valuable purpose. They can for recon. And then, also they can be used to, because it's unmanned, it can fly a very deadly mission, right? Also, smartphone, it's an innovative product, right? A smartphone is also an innovative product. Think about it. Before iPhone, there was no smartphone. I mean, they say there was a smartphone before iPhone, but it never had any commercial success. iPhone is the first smartphone that had a commercial success. And then think about it. So that's what is meant by innovative, right? That's what innovative means. But then so that's something new that has never existed before. So if we are using iPhone as an example, right? Through R&D, the iPhone was born, right? And in the early days of iPhone, there was no competitor. It was only iPhone. So iPhone saw iPhone had a brief period of monopoly because there was no competitor. Probably 2007 through 2008, for about 2 years, it probably had it probably enjoyed a period of monopoly. And think about it, because there is no competitor, it would see an explosive growth. You understand what explosive growth is? I've been telling you, I've been talking about this over and over. People like to use the word innovative. People like to use the word exponential growth or explosive growth, but I've been telling you, to have really innovative growth, explosive growth, exponential growth, it has to be confirmed by the data and the pattern of the data. Graphic. So look, this pattern, right? I've been telling you, this pattern is the proof right? This pattern is the proof of the exponential growth, right? Because what kind of characteristics does that curve have? It has the slope of that curve is increasing. The slope of that curve is increasing over time. In other words, the slope is getting steeper and steeper and steeper. That means, growth rate is accelerating, right? If it is the other way around, right, then it is, decay. Now, so obviously the growth rate would be very high, steep, right? During this period, you will see a steep growth rate. In other words, high growth rate. You will see a high growth rate. And after that, you will have relatively constant growth range. Okay, so okay. Oh, what did I do? So it's hard to, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, stop there. So as the whole industry, you will see, there will be, in stage two, which is called growth stage, the competitors will enter the market. And as the competitors enter the market, right, from the competition, right, of course, the competitors will grow at a fast rate early on, and then goes into the slope here and the slope here. You can tell steeper growth and relatively slower growth. And then it goes into the maturity, which is stage three. And in stage three, remember, mature companies have very little room for growth. If the company is mature, clearly, that's not uh, mature product line. Mature product line has very little room for growth. That means they have already hit the maximum market share. If they have hit the maximum market share, they will have little room for growth. And then after that, it goes into decline. Of course, not every product goes into decline. Not every industry goes into decline. Um, uh, Think about it. Do you think the smartphone market, smartphone is actually, do you think smartphone is here in maturity stage? Huh?
Yeah, because that's why they try to add so many other aspects to their business. It's not just smartphone.
It's not just what?
So it's not like a company like Apple isn't just smartphones anymore because there's only so much they can do with that. That's what I would think. That's why they have watches.
Yeah. True. True. But what I'm thinking is the smartphone, even by smartphone alone, I think it is somewhere here, somewhere in between.
Well, I guess even if everyone had one, you can only.
Exactly, because you know what? First of all, not everyone in the world has a smartphone, right? I mean, kids, almost all adults have smartphone, but still, in some parts of the world there are people, and senior citizens, there are some senior citizens who don't like smartphones, and they like, big, button, key, button key, easy to, and not all the kids have smartphones. So in terms of demographics, there are still some segments that can be exploited. Not only on top of all that, some people can have 2 smartphones, 3 smartphones. Why? if you have, if you're leading a dubious life, right? Or some undercover agents can have, multiple. Of course, that would be very, infinitesimal segment of the market. But on top of all that, people, they lose phones, and then their phones break down, so they will need a new phone. Plus, the companies, that doesn't bring in enough revenue to the companies, right? I mean, just those incremental sale, right? Doesn't bring in enough. So what do? They always upgrade their system. When they upgrade their system, people have to buy new phones. I mean, once the operating system is upgraded, you cannot use the old, operating system anymore. An old operating system. It's not like a. And on your phone, I don't know, the upgrade, they will allow upgrade only up to a certain point, because if the hardware cannot support that upgrade, you'll have to buy a new phone. So they constantly, even the phone alone, just by the phone alone, it's not really going into a flat lining. It's not going to go into flat lining just yet. And on top of all that, as you said, they are adding in, other, whatever it is. But the other product line is, it's a different thing. But smartphone alone, even the smartphone alone. So if you're talking about other product line, then that's the company, not just that single product, right? And so it's obvious, we're not, think about it. If you are investing in stock, you are not interested in the company whose growth rate is flatlining or declining, right? If the growth rate shows this pattern, Before they do that, you will sell, and you will be only interested in these two stages of growth: fast growth and constant growth, right? So that's why sometimes, variable growth model is also called two-stage model, right? Because those two stages are the relevant stages of growth, right? So now that's the reason why we have variable growth model. So let's take a look at the example of variable growth model. Most recent annual dividend payment of Warren Industries, a rapidly growing boat manufacturer. So, okay, time, that means, T0. Oops, what's going on? This is T0, right? And this is dividend at time T. Okay, and as I said before, does the name matter? Warren Industries? Name doesn't matter. You can call it Company X. Boat manufacturer, whether it is a boat manufacturer or cosmetics manufacturer, doesn't really matter. They are, but then a rapidly growing company, rapidly growing, right? This is a Q, right? This is a Q that to what? Oh, there's going to be it's a rapid growth. There's a rapid growth period, and following the rapid growth period, there will be a slow growth period, right? So that's a cue that this is about variable growth model. And the firm's financial manager expects that these dividends will increase at a 10% annual rate. Okay, so this is G1, the fast growth rate over the next 3 years. Okay, at the end of 3 years, end of 2015, the firm's mature product, now they say mature. When the company is in mature stage, then they don't grow. I mean, there's very little room for growth, very little room for growth. So the growth rate will slow down. So the mature product line is expected to result in a slowing of the dividend growth to 5% per year. So G2. This G1 and G2 is what I added in. That wasn't in the original text. But just to clarify, and for the foreseeable future. Foreseeable future, I mean, if the growth rate will remain at 5% for the foreseeable future, that means what? That's like indefinitely, right? So that means it's going to be constant indefinitely. And the firm's required return is 15%. Okay, so how do we then handle a problem like this? So I downloaded, right, this file. You need to also open that file. And in that file, okay, so here, this is what I did. So okay. What am I doing? So look, time T0 is 2012, right? And dividend was given like this. And then for the next 3 years, T1, T2, T3, all you need to do is compound it, because the growth rate is given as 10%, right, for the next 3 years, right? Dividend at time 0 times 1 plus growth rate, raised to the time digit, and then I drag it down, right? Drag it down. Simply by dragging down, you get the forecast of dividends for the next 3 years. Now you have to also then what you need to do is we'll have to discount it to present because these are future cash flows. So we must discount it to present, right? We must find the present value, which is then simple. You discount all of that, all these numbers by. So you must lock this. If you don't lock, right? Oops. If you don't lock it, you're gonna mess it up. So you lock it, and then you drag it down, and then all the present values you got. And then I'll find the sum of all of that, right? Because what is valuation? Valuation is all about the present value. So the dividends for the next 3 years, you find the present value of that, and then after 2015, 3 years later, right? From 2016, it's gonna grow at the slow rate of 5%. And again, when the company goes into a slow constant growth phase, what is that? What does that mean? I've been telling you, that's the Q4 golden growth model, right? When it said after 3 years it's going to go into a slow growth phase for the foreseeable future, that means it's going to be constant, right? Indefinitely. So that's the Q4 golden growth model. And hence, we use, what I need is, okay, I need dividend at time t plus 1. Dividend at time t plus 1. Of course, using, this is dividend at time t, using this growth rate, I can generate that. I got $2.10. And then using golden growth model, dividend at time t plus 1 over r minus g. We have r here, we have g here, okay? But then again, you remember golden growth model is one period model. That means this is the price of the stock at time t. We generated, time t, in other words, using time t plus 1, dividend at time t plus 1, which is time t plus 1 is 2016. So using dividend at time t plus 1, we found the price of the stock at time t. So time t is actually, so this is, this is time, the price of the stock at the end of 2015, right? So this is not really V0, actually. Our time zero is, remember, our time zero is 2012. We want V0, not, so what does that mean? This is, actually a price of the stock at the end of time 3. So all you need to do is you'll need to discount it 3 years back. You only need to discount it 3 years back, right? Okay. So discount it 3 years back. That's it. And then we have we have present value of all the dividends for the next 3 years. That's the present value. This is present value. So you add them up, and then you come to 1790, right? This is basically, variable growth model. I mean, this is one type of example. There can be more, complex example, but really the problem is how they they have really a creative way of making problems, generating problems. So you can see a lot more complex example in Finance 300. Okay, so if you're interested in learning further about how complex the problem can be, wait for Finance 300, right? Um, so if you delete all those highlighted cells and try it on your own, and if you got the same result, if you get the same result, then you got this right. Okay. Alrighty. So we have next is free cash flow model. But let's. I think it's a good time to take a break first. Let's take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back to free cash flow model. Okay. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break. All right, so it took a little longer than I thought. I was downloading the video from the previous class, and it took forever. All right, so next, next model, the fourth model, right? So there are 4 DDM, dividend discount models, right? And we've covered the first 3, and then free cash flow model. So what is free cash flow model? First of all, free cash flow, right? We need to define what free cash. But sometimes some people might think, free cash flow is really, free. I mean, or something that is what should I say? Not liberal, but some, unbridled, some unbridled, libertine concept of, cash flow. No, actually, free cash flow is really, really strictly defined, right? It's not, it's not libertines, so, unprincipled, so what is a free cash flow? It's defined as, all these verbal definitions are really not a firm, clear way of understanding it. Generally, they say in verbal definition, cash generated, okay, cash generated beyond reinvestment need. So what is reinvestment need? This is reinvestment need. Investment in operating capital. So think about it. Operating capital means what? Operating capital is basically, we know capital breaks down into 2 types of fixed assets, right? Physical capital. And physical capital is, fixed assets of physical capital is that's the determinant of the production capacity of the company. Isn't that right? Physical capital means plant and equipment. And the plant and equipment constantly wear and tear. Right? As you use the plant and equipment, they wear and tear. That's why there is depreciation, right? The depreciation comes from the wear and tear of the physical capital. So when the physical capital depreciates from wear and tear, you need to replace it, right? No management will just let it just lose value, like wear and tear. And if you just let it wear and tear, then it's not only, it doesn't only result in depreciation, but also it results in lower production capacity, right? Think about it. Wear and tear will bring down the production capacity of your plant, right, of your business. So they need to replace or replenish what has been depleted. Make sense? You need to replenish what has been depleted. So there will be a change. There will be a change in fixed assets, and there will be a change in net working capital. What's working capital? Working capital is current assets. Current assets are working capital. Isn't that right? Remember that? Current assets is the working capital. Fixed assets are physical capital, right? Fixed assets are physical capital. Current assets are working capital. Net working capital is basically what? Current assets minus current liability, right? That's net working capital. So in other words, you will constantly have to, where does the money come from to replace and replenish the depleted portion of your fixed assets, right? If you need more working capital, where does that money come from? It will have to come from your operating cash flow, right? So subtracting that investment in operating capital from operating cash flow, that's free cash flow. And what is, then operating cash flow? Now, operating cash, you might, oh, you've heard, isn't it? You heard of you probably remember operating income. What's operating? So isn't it something similar? No, it's not exactly the same thing. Operating income is EBIT. Another name for operating income is EBIT, isn't it? Operating income is EBIT. But that operating income is EBIT, but that's not cash flow. That's not exactly cash flow. Why? First of all, you cannot touch the tax, right? There's nothing you can do about tax. So because it belongs to the government, you cannot touch that. So that's not taxes, you have to subtract it. And then you'll have to add back in the depreciation. Why? Because depreciation is not really expense. Depreciation, although depreciation is depreciation is put into the expenses section of the operating expenses, right? In the income statement, if you remember, again, I cannot open this. So in the income statement, you remember income comes from two sources, right? Revenue and investment income. And then expenses come from two sources, CGS and operating expenses, OPEX. And in the one of the OPEX is depreciation. Depreciation is one. So it looks like it's an expense. But depreciation is also it also appears in the balance sheet as well, right? If you remember, it also appears in the balance sheet. But the depreciation, depreciation represents the loss of value in the physical assets, right? Loss of value in physical assets. But how is it expense? So actually, depreciation in the balance sheet is actually matched by the depreciation in the income statement. And the reason is you are suppose you have a physical asset, something like a production equipment, and you paid $500,000. I mean that production equipment is $500,000. Now it will depreciate every month, every year, every quarter, basically at least every quarter. But this asset was purchased, right, at time zero, this physical asset was purchased at time zero by paying the full price, $500,000. You paid full price of $500,000. So actually, the expense of $500,000 was already incurred at time zero, right? That 500K is already incurred at time zero. But you make it look like, so if that was the actual expense that occurred in year one at time zero, you would like to write it off. You would like to write it off as expense in year one, right? But then IRS doesn't want you to do that. IRS wants you to spread it over like 10 years, right? So actually, from year two, think about it. From year two, if you spread it over 10 years, it's like $50,000 every year. You're trying to show it as if you paid $50,000 every year. You paid the expense of $50,000 every year. So in other words, you paid for this equipment at time zero, but you can't write it off in year one. Instead, you have to write it off over 10 years by writing off like 50,000 every year, 1/10 every year. Okay, so that means actually from year two, that $50,000 is not really spent in year two. Year three, year four, year five, all the remaining years, that 50K was not really spent in that year. Make sense? So they are hollow. Actually, that's why they call it non-cash outlay. What does that mean? Non-cash spending, right? It's actually hollow numbers. Those are hollow, just taking up the expense section of the income statement, right? That makes sense. So then, think about it. You didn't really spend $50,000 in year two, year three, year four, year five, but you recorded, you entered it in the income statement as if it was expense. And what's gonna happen? Actually, that makes the expense look bigger than it really is, right? It makes expense every year bigger by $50,000. So this is actually $50,000 preserved, isn't it right? From year two, you are writing $50,000 as an expense, but $50,000 wasn't really spent in year two, year three, year four, year five. So for those years, those $50,000 are saved, right? Those $50,000 are saved or preserved. And hence, you have to, that's $50,000 cash saved, so that you have to add that back in. You have to add that back in. That's why you add that back in. So anyway, that is the structure of operating cash flow, right? Operating cash flow. So that's what free cash flow is. So once you arrive at free cash flow, that's true cash flow from. But then why do we use this model? The answer is because if the firm doesn't pay any dividend, then we cannot use dividend discount model. Dividend discount model breaks down if the firm doesn't pay any dividend, right? Makes sense. Therefore, we use free. In that case, instead of dividend, we use free cash flow, right? So here's the idea. Then think about it. The value of any firm, value of any company, any value of the firm is basically the present value of all future cash flows. Isn't that right? The value of the company is, a company is only as valuable as its future free cash flows, right? So basically the future cash flows will have to be discounted to present. So that's quite obvious. That's understandable. And then here, what is this? RA. Of course, you might say that's the discount rate. Yes, that's the discount rate. But it's called average cost of capital. That RA is the weighted average cost of capital. Weighted average cost of capital. Why? Remember, this is an important concept because free cash flow is, you understand, profit of EBIT. You know what EBIT is? Operating profit. EBIT is the result. It's the result of the workings of total assets. Isn't that right? Total assets. Total assets exist. What is the sole purpose of total assets? Assets exist to generate income. Isn't that right? Assets exist to generate income. So basically, total asset, size of the total asset determines the company's production capacity, right? So EBIT and free cash flow are not exactly the same thing, but think about it. Assets, the sole purpose of asset is to generate profit for the owners of the company. And we understand assets break down into debt and equity, right? Assets break down into debt and equity. And equity is common stock. Debt is debt, bond, right? So think about it. How would you discount this free cash flow? Because free cash flow is the result of the workings of both debt and equity. You cannot discount it only by required return. Required return is the discount rate for the equity, but you cannot discount it by cost of debt. In other words, you discount the debt with yield to maturity, which is cost of debt. Isn't that right? You discount the bond with cost of debt, which is yield to maturity, and you discount the equity, you discount the stock by required return, which is cost of equity, right? So think about it. To discount free cash flow, which is the result of the workings of both debt and equity. And you remember, I talked about this earlier. I mean, at the beginning of the semester when we did, topic 2. I likened it to a tree, right? Basically, think about it. A company is like a tree, and so the tree is the total assets. The tree is the total assets, right? And the fruit on the tree is that's the result of the tree, isn't that right? And you bought the tree by raising capital through equity and debt. You borrowed money. The tree is, let's say $1 million. You borrowed, 400K right? So 400K is that, and 600K you found, you raised it through equity, right? So the tree bears fruit, and this fruit is, the fruit is what? That's the profit. So although the profit belongs to only the equity holders, not the bond holders, but this tree is the result, the fruit is the result of the workings of both equity and debt, right? Makes sense? So um, the proper way, so you cannot just discount, it with uh, either. You cannot just discount it with only cost of debt or only cost of equity. So you'll have to use weighted average cost of capital. Weighted average cost of capital, it means, obviously, it's simple. Weighted average cost of capital means weight of equity times cost of equity plus weight of debt times cost of debt, right? That's weighted average cost of capital. And by using that as the discount rate, we can find the value of the company. And we all know so then think about it. Value of the company is the sum of value of the equity and the value of the preferred stock, value of the common stock plus value of the preferred stock and value of the debt, right? And what we are interested in is the value of the equity. So then if you want to just separate the value of the equity, what needs to be done is from the value of the company, you subtract value of debt, value of preferred stock, right? In other words, through free cash flow model, we found value of, through this model, we found value of the company. And from the value of the company, we isolate only value of the equity, or common stock. So that means we need to know the value of the debt and value of the preferred stock. But if we know that, then we can isolate value of the common stock only. And since this is an aggregate, in other words, this is the value of the total equity. This is the value of the total equity. It's aggregate number, right? It's an aggregate number. So we'll need to divide it by number of shares outstanding. If you divide it by number of shares outstanding, then you get to value of the common stock per share, right? That's the whole idea behind it. So this is another reason why I'm using also the symbol S0, because VE, that's the aggregate value of the equity, aggregate. So if you want only, per share price, you'll have to divide it by number of shares, right? So basically, this is an example that is, this is the solution that is matching. That's matching this example. Okay, so I want you to, that's all the time we have, right? So I cannot go over this. So please, watch my video, and that explains, and then watch it and do it, right? Delete the highlighted cells, and you can My video will walk you through this process, so it won't be a difficult thing. All right, so let's okay, so that's it. The classes, this is the end of the class, end of the semester, right? The last day of the class. I hope you have enjoyed this class, right, throughout the semester. And good luck on your final, right? Luck to you on your final. Okay? All righty. You're welcome. I was hope to. Yeah, I guess final started today already, right? So Wednesday is the last day of the week. Okay? All righty. So I'll hope to see you guys in the next semester in advanced finance courses. Okay? All righty. So let me, let's see. If there's anyone still hanging in there. Matthews, hopefully, Matthews is still, but inactive. Oh, Daniela was there, but she's inactive. All righty, so stop recording.